At the grand ballroom of Hawkhurst Manor, Lady Genevieve Sinclair stood near the marble pillar, her dark eyes surveying the glittering assembly with the practiced ease of someone born into this world, yet never quite comfortable within it. At 22, Genevieve possessed what her late mother had called an unfortunate combination of beauty and brain. Blonde hair that caught the light like spun gold, a figure that turned heads in any room, and a mind sharp enough to make most gentlemen uncomfortable. Her father, the Marquis Rupert Sinclair, had long since given up trying to marry her off to the parade of suitable bachelors who found her opinions on parliamentary reform far less appealing than her dowry. "You're doing it again," whispered her younger sister Charlotte, appearing at her elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. "That face you make when you're analyzing everyone like specimens in a museum." Genevieve accepted the glass with a slight smile. "I cannot help it if most people are predictable. Look there. Lord Pemberton will propose a toast within the next 5 minutes. Lady Catherine will feign interest in whatever he says while mentally cataloguing every piece of jewellery in the room, and someone will inevitably ask our host about his travels to India." "Speaking of our host," Charlotte said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "have you actually seen the Duke yet? They say he's positively terrifying. Father mentioned he once made Lord Ashford's cousin weep simply by looking at him during a business negotiation." "Grown men don't weep from mere looks, Charlotte. That's absurd." "Then explain why half the ladies here are too frightened to even glance in his direction, and the other half look like they want to throw themselves at his feet despite the fear." Genevieve had heard the stories naturally. Who hadn't? Duke Lucian Hawkhurst, 32 years old, inherited his title at 20 after his father's sudden death, vastly wealthy from estates spanning 3 counties and investments in shipping ventures to the East Indies. But it was his reputation that preceded him like a winter storm, cold, calculating, ruthless in business. A man who had turned his back on London society for years, only to return last season with an air of danger that made even the most hardened lords tread carefully in his presence. "There he is," Charlotte breathed, and Genevieve followed her gaze to the far end of the ballroom. She understood immediately why people whispered. Duke Lucian Hawkhurst stood near the fireplace, tall and imposing, in impeccably tailored black evening wear that seemed designed to make him look like a panther among peacocks. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and aristocratic lines, with eyes the colour of winter ice that seemed to assess everything they touched. He wasn't classically handsome in the soft, gentle way of London's favoured sons. He was something else entirely. Dangerous. Magnetic, the sort of man mothers warned their daughters about. "Goodness gracious," Charlotte murmured. "The rumours don't do him justice." "He's just a man, Charlotte. A man who looks like he could crush your heart with one hand while penning a business contract with the other." Genevieve was about to respond when the majordomo's voice rang out. "Distinguished guests, His Grace requests your presence in the dining hall. Dinner is served." The procession into the dining room followed the rigid protocol of rank, dukes and duchesses first, followed by marquises, then earls and their families in descending order. Genevieve found herself seated midway down the impossibly long mahogany table, with Charlotte on her right and an elderly countess on her left, who immediately began complaining about the draught from the windows. The Duke sat at the head of the table, naturally, with Lord and Lady Ashford positioned close by in seats of honour. Edmund Ashford was a viscount with political ambitions and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. His wife, Lady Margaret, possessed the kind of calculated beauty that came from expensive gowns and even more expensive jewellery, her dark hair arranged in elaborate curls that must have taken her maid hours to perfect. Genevieve had met them both briefly upon arrival. Something about the couple made her instinctively uncomfortable, though she couldn't articulate why. Perhaps it was the way Lord Ashford's compliments felt like assessments, or how Lady Margaret's laughter seemed just a touch too practiced, too perfectly timed. The first course arrived, a delicate consommé that steamed in fine porcelain bowls. Conversation flowed around her in waves of meaningless pleasantries. Lady Pemberton discussed her daughter's upcoming presentation at court. Lord Harrison debated the merits of a new irrigation system for his Devonshire estate. Charlotte kicked Genevieve under the table and nodded toward a young gentleman across from them who'd been staring for the past 5 minutes. "Mr. Thomas Whitfield," Charlotte whispered, "heir to the Whitfield textile fortune. Father mentioned him last week. Father mentions many gentlemen. I'm not a racehorse to be auctioned." "No, but you are 22, and showing no signs of accepting any proposals. At this rate, you'll end up like Aunt Philippa, living alone with 12 cats and a parrot named Wellington. Aunt Philippa is perfectly happy, and Wellington is excellent company." The second course arrived, then the third. Genevieve found herself relaxing slightly, the wine and food softening the edges of her usual social anxiety. Perhaps this evening wouldn't be as tedious as she'd feared. Perhaps. Her thoughts stopped abruptly. Lady Margaret Ashford had risen from her seat, ostensibly to speak with a friend several chairs away. But as she passed behind the Duke's chair, Genevieve caught a movement so quick, so subtle, that she almost dismissed it as imagination. Almost. Lady Margaret's hand, concealed within the folds of her silk gown, withdrew something small, a tiny glass vial, no larger than Genevieve's thumb. The movement was practiced, smooth, the gesture of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. As Lord Edmund engaged the Duke in animated conversation about shipping routes, gesturing expansively enough to draw attention, his wife's fingers moved with surgical precision. The vial tipped. A clear liquid, barely visible, just a few drops, splashed into the Duke's wineglass. Genevieve's heart slammed against her ribs. Time seemed to slow, each second stretching like honey. Lady Margaret slipped the vial back into her gown, her expression never changing, her smile remaining perfectly in place. Lord Edmund laughed at something the Duke said, his hand clapping Lucien's shoulder in a gesture of false camaraderie. No one else had seen. The entire room continued their conversations, oblivious. The Duke reached for his wineglass. Genevieve didn't think. She simply moved. Rising from her chair so quickly it scraped against the floor, she crossed the space between her seat and the Duke's in 4 swift strides. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. She felt the weight of dozens of eyes, but her focus remained fixed on that wineglass rising toward those ice-blue eyes. "Don't drink that," she whispered urgently, her hand shooting out. The wineglass tilted. Red liquid spilled across the pristine white tablecloth in a spreading stain that looked disturbingly like blood. The crystal struck the table with a sharp crack but didn't shatter. Silence crashed over the room like a physical force. The Duke's eyes, those infamous winter-cold eyes, fixed on her face. Up close they were even more intense than she'd imagined, containing depths that seemed to calculate 1,000 possibilities in the space of a heartbeat. "Lady Genevieve," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through her bones. "That was my wine. It was poisoned." The words left her mouth before she could consider the consequences. Gasps rippled through the assembled nobility. Someone's fork clattered against china. "Poisoned." Lady Margaret's voice rose in shocked indignation. "What a preposterous accusation! Your Grace, I'm terribly sorry, but it seems Lady Sinclair has had too much wine herself. The poor dear must be confused." Lord Edmund stood, his face reddening. "This is outrageous. My wife and I are guests in this house, and we're being slandered by this hysterical girl." "I am neither hysterical nor confused," Genevieve said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I saw Lady Ashford add something to the Duke's wine from a small vial, just moments ago, as she passed behind his chair." "You saw no such thing." Lady Margaret's hand flew to her chest in theatrical shock. "I was merely greeting Lady Worthington. I never went near His Grace's glass." "You're mistaken, child," Lord Edmund said, his tone dripping with condescension. "These dinner parties can be overwhelming, especially for young ladies of sensitive constitution. Perhaps you should retire to the drawing-room and rest." Genevieve felt heat rise to her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but anger. "I am not mistaken. I know what I saw. This is absolutely scandalous," Lady Pemberton announced to no one in particular. "To make such accusations without proof, someone should send for the Marquis Sinclair," another voice suggested. "His daughter clearly needs to be removed before she causes further embarrassment." The words struck like physical blows. Genevieve felt the room closing in, felt the weight of judgment from every direction. She'd acted on instinct, on certainty, but standing here now with the entire aristocracy staring at her like she'd lost her mind, doubt began to creep in. What if she was wrong? What if the shadows and candlelight had played tricks? What if she'd just destroyed her family's reputation over a mistake? Then the Duke moved. His hand, large, warm, steady, closed around hers. The gesture was gentle, but unmistakable. Every eye in the room tracked the movement. Lucian Hawkhurst stood slowly, his considerable height making everyone else seem small by comparison. He didn't release Genevieve's hand. Instead, his thumb brushed across her knuckles in a gesture that felt absurdly intimate given the circumstances. His ice-blue eyes held hers for a long moment. Then he spoke 3 words that would change everything. "I believe you." The room erupted. "Your Grace, surely you cannot—" Lord Ashford sputtered. "I believe Lady Genevieve," Lucian repeated, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade through silk. "And I suggest we investigate this matter thoroughly before anyone leaves this house." Lady Margaret's face had gone pale. "This is ridiculous. We are your guests. We've known your family for 20 years. 20 years or 20 minutes. Attempted murder carries the same weight." The Duke's voice remained calm, but something deadly lurked beneath the surface. "Lord Ashford, I suggest you and your wife remain in the drawing room while I send for a physician to test the wine. If Lady Genevieve is mistaken, you'll have my sincerest apologies and any recompense you desire." "And if she's not?" Lord Edmund's face had turned from red to ashen. "Then you'll have a very different conversation with the magistrate." The Ashfords exchanged a glance, quick, panicked, speaking volumes. Then Lady Margaret did something that sealed their fate. Her hand moved toward the hidden pocket in her gown where the vial rested. "Don't," Lucian said softly, but with such command that Margaret's hand froze mid-movement. "Whatever you're reaching for, I suggest you reconsider." Lord Edmund grabbed his wife's arm. "We don't have to tolerate this humiliation. We're leaving." "No one is leaving," the Duke said, and though he didn't raise his voice, something in his tone made it clear this wasn't a request. He looked toward his butler. "Jameson, send for Dr. Whitmore immediately, and ensure that Lord and Lady Ashford's carriage is temporarily unavailable." "Your Grace," Lord Edmund's voice cracked, "you cannot hold us prisoner in your home." "I can do whatever is necessary to protect my household and my guests, which, I should note, includes determining why someone would attempt to poison me at my own dinner table." Lucian's eyes were chips of ice. "Now shall we adjourn to the drawing room and wait for the physician, or would you prefer to make this even more interesting?" The threat hung in the air like smoke. Lord Ashford's jaw worked soundlessly. Lady Margaret looked like she might faint, all her practiced composure crumbling. "The drawing room," Edmund finally managed. "But this is a mistake, a terrible mistake. We shall see." As footmen moved to escort the Ashfords from the dining room, Lucian finally released Genevieve's hand. She immediately felt the loss of that steady warmth. "Lady Genevieve," he said, his voice pitched for her ears alone, "I would speak with you privately, if you're amenable." Her father appeared at her elbow, his face creased with concern. "Genevieve, what in heaven's name—" "Father, I'll explain everything, but first—" She looked at the Duke, at those penetrating eyes that seemed to see straight through to her bones. "Yes, Your Grace, I'm amenable." Charlotte squeezed her arm as she passed. "You're either the bravest person I know or the maddest," she whispered. "Possibly both." Genevieve followed the Duke from the dining room, acutely aware of every whisper, every stare following their departure. She'd just accused prominent members of society of attempted murder in front of the entire aristocracy. Her reputation would either be vindicated or destroyed by whatever happened next. There was no middle ground anymore. The Duke led her to his study, a masculine room of dark wood and leather, shelves lined with books and maps, a fire crackling in the hearth. He closed the door, then leaned against his desk, regarding her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "That," he said finally, "was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've witnessed in recent memory." "I saw what I saw," Genevieve said, lifting her chin. "Even if the entire world thinks me mad, I know what Lady Ashford did. I don't think you're mad." He moved closer and she caught the scent of sandalwood and something darker, more complex. "I think you have exceptional observational skills and no sense of self-preservation. Would you rather I'd said nothing, let you drink poison?" "No." The word was soft but absolute. "No, I'm grateful beyond measure. I'm simply trying to understand why you risked everything to save a man you've never even met." Genevieve considered the question. "Because it was the right thing to do. Because I couldn't live with myself if I'd stayed silent. Because—" She paused, searching for words. "Because some things matter more than reputation or propriety." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in that icy facade. Most people would disagree with that assessment. Then most people are cowards. To her surprise, he laughed. It was a rusty sound, as if he didn't do it often, but genuine. "You're unlike anyone I've ever met, Lady Genevieve." Is that a compliment or criticism? I'm not entirely sure yet. A knock interrupted them. Jameson, the butler, entered with a silver tray bearing a fresh glass of wine, and Dr. Whitmore, a thin man with spectacles and the permanent expression of someone who'd seen too many of society's secrets. "Your Grace," the physician said, bowing, "I came as quickly as I could." Jameson mentioned there was some concern about contaminated wine. Lucian gestured to the stained tablecloth that a footman had brought in. "The spilled wine, Doctor. I need to know if it contains anything unnatural." Dr. Whitmore set to work with various vials and instruments that Genevieve didn't recognize. The minutes stretched. Lucian stood perfectly still, his attention divided between the doctor and Genevieve in a way that made her pulse quicken. Finally, Dr. Whitmore looked up, his face grave. "Your Grace, there is definitely a foreign substance in this wine. Based on the color change in my reagent test, I'd say it's most likely arsenic. Not enough to kill immediately, but enough to make you violently ill. Continued doses over time would be fatal." The room seemed to tilt. Genevieve grabbed the edge of the desk to steady herself. "Arsenic," Lucian repeated, his voice deadly calm. How thoughtful of Lord and Lady Ashford. "Subtle enough to seem like natural illness. Shall I inform the magistrate?" Jameson asked. "Not yet. First, I want to understand why." The Duke's eyes found Genevieve's. "You saved my life tonight, Lady Genevieve. That is not a debt I take lightly." "I don't want your debt, I just want justice. You may find those two things are more connected than you realize." He moved to the window, staring out at the dark gardens. "The Ashfords will deny everything, naturally. They'll claim the contamination happened after the wine was spilled, or that someone else had access to my glass. Without the vial Margaret used, it's her word against yours." "Then we search her," Genevieve said. "The vial must still be in her gown. She'll have disposed of it by now, thrown it in the fire, dropped it in a plant pot, given it to her maid to hide. She's not stupid, just desperate." He turned back to face her. "This will get worse before it gets better, you realize. The Ashfords have friends, influence, connections throughout London society. They'll paint you as hysterical, delusional, a troublemaker seeking attention. I know. Your reputation will suffer, severely. Marriage prospects will evaporate. Invitations will cease. Your father will face pressure from his peers to manage you." Genevieve felt each word like a stone dropping into a well, the splash echoing in the darkness. "I know," she repeated, quieter this time. "Yet you don't regret speaking up." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "No, I'd do it again." Lucian studied her for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind those ice-blue eyes. Then he smiled, a real smile this time, not the polite mask he'd worn earlier. It transformed his entire face, made him look younger, almost human. "Then I suppose we're allies now, Lady Genevieve, because I don't abandon people who save my life, regardless of what society demands. And if the Ashfords want war, I'm more than happy to oblige. What will you do?" "What I do best." His smile turned sharp. "I'll investigate. I'll gather evidence. I'll dismantle their lives piece by piece until they're begging to confess. And you?" He moved closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "You are going to be my ally in this, my partner, which means you'll be spending a great deal of time in my company." "Is that a threat or a promise?" "That depends entirely on your perspective. And what will people say about a young lady spending time alone with the most dangerous duke in England?" His smile widened. "Exactly what they're already thinking. But by the time we're done, their opinions won't matter. The truth will." Genevieve knew she should be frightened, should retreat to safety, to propriety, to the comfortable cage society had built for women like her. Instead, looking into those winter eyes that burned with purpose, and something else she couldn't quite name, she felt only one thing: exhilaration. "Then I accept your partnership, Your Grace." "Lucian," he said, "if we're to be allies against vipers, you should call me Lucian. Only if you call me Genevieve." "Very well, Genevieve." The way he said her name felt like a caress. "Welcome to the most dangerous game in London. I hope you're ready." As she left his study and returned to find her worried father and excited sister, Genevieve realized something. Ready or not, her life had just changed irrevocably. The safe, predictable path she'd been walking had ended tonight. Whatever lay ahead would be dangerous, scandalous, and possibly devastating. She couldn't wait. The morning after the disastrous dinner party, Genevieve woke to find London society had already passed judgment. "It's everywhere," Charlotte said, bursting into her bedroom with a stack of morning correspondence. "Every breakfast table from Mayfair to Belgravia is discussing what happened last night. And Genevieve, it's not good." Genevieve sat up, accepting the letters with trepidation. The first was from Lady Pemberton, politely but firmly uninviting her to next week's garden party. The second was from Mrs. Caroline Thornbury, cancelling their scheduled visit to discuss charitable work. The third, fourth, and fifth followed similar patterns. Invitations withdrawn, engagements postponed indefinitely, social doors closing with the soft but definitive click of rejection. "What does father say?" Genevieve asked, setting the letters aside. "He's in his study. He's been in there since dawn with Lord Whitmore and Lord Harrison. I heard raised voices." Charlotte perched on the edge of the bed, her usual cheerfulness dimmed. "They're saying terrible things, Jenny. That you've always been odd. That you've read too many novels, that you were seeking attention from the Duke by creating a scandal. That's absurd. I was trying to save his life. I know that. You know that. But Lord and Lady Ashford have been very busy this morning. They visited half of London's most influential families, telling their version of events. In their story, you're an unstable young woman who became infatuated with the Duke and fabricated the entire poisoning attempt to gain his attention." Genevieve felt ice in her veins. "That's a complete fabrication. But it's a believable one. Think about it. The Duke is wealthy, titled, and mysterious. You're an unmarried lady known for having unconventional opinions. You spilled his wine in front of everyone and made dramatic accusations without proof. To anyone who wasn't there, who didn't see what you saw, their version sounds more plausible than yours. The physician confirmed there was arsenic in the wine, which the Ashfords claim was added after the wine was spilled, precisely to support your accusation. They're suggesting you orchestrated the entire thing, perhaps even poisoned the wine yourself after knocking it over." Charlotte grabbed her hand. "I know it's monstrous, but that's what they're telling people." A knock at the door interrupted them. Their lady's maid, Agnes, entered with a troubled expression. "Miss Genevieve, your father requests your presence in his study. Immediately." The walk down the corridor felt like a march to the gallows. Genevieve found her father standing by the window, his usually ruddy complexion pale, his shoulders bowed under invisible weight. "Father," she began, but he raised a hand. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" His voice was quiet, which somehow made it worse than shouting. "In one evening you've managed to make our family the subject of the most scandalous gossip London has seen in years. I saved a man's life. You accused respected members of society of attempted murder without a shred of proof. The physician found arsenic, which proves nothing about who put it there." He turned to face her, and she saw genuine fear in his eyes. "Genevieve, I've spent the morning fielding visits from some of the most powerful men in England. They're all saying the same thing: control your daughter, or face the consequences." "What consequences?" "Social ruin. Business partnerships dissolved, political alliances severed. Do you understand? This isn't just about you anymore. This affects our entire family, our tenants, our standing in society." "So you want me to lie, to recant what I saw?" "I want you to be reasonable. Lord Ashford has offered to let this entire matter drop if you issue a public apology, admitting you were mistaken." "I wasn't mistaken." "Genevieve, father, I know what I saw. Lady Ashford poisoned the Duke's wine. If I apologize, if I recant, I'm not just lying. I'm letting attempted murderers go free." Her father sank into his chair, suddenly looking much older than his 50 years. "The Duke believes you. Did you know that? He sent a message this morning stating in no uncertain terms that he stands by your account of events." "Then why?" "Because belief and proof are different things. Without evidence, without the vial, without witnesses, this becomes a matter of reputation and influence. And in that arena, my dear, we're outmatched. The Ashfords have the support of half the peerage. They've positioned themselves as the wounded parties, victims of a young woman's delusions. Genevieve felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. "What would you have me do?" "I don't know," he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "I'm trying to protect you, but I don't know how. If you maintain your accusations, society will destroy you. If you recant, you'll have to live with the lie. Either way, your prospects for a good marriage are—" He trailed off, unable to finish. "Ruined?" "Severely compromised." A different knock sounded. Jameson, their butler, entered with a silver tray bearing a single card. "My lord, the Duke of Hawkhurst is here to see Lady Genevieve." Her father and Genevieve exchanged glances. "Show him to the drawing room," the Marquis said. "And Genevieve, be careful. The Duke's support is valuable, but it comes with its own dangers. He's not a man known for following society's rules. Perhaps that's exactly what I need right now." She found Lucian standing by the drawing-room fireplace, looking entirely too large and masculine for the delicate furniture and pastel walls. He'd dressed more casually than last night, still impeccably tailored, but in day clothes of deep charcoal that somehow made his eyes even more striking. "Lady Genevieve," he said, bowing, "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all, Your Grace, though I suspect my father would prefer you'd sent a letter rather than calling in person." "I'm sure he would. But letters can be intercepted, and I prefer to deliver certain messages face to face." He studied her. "You've heard the rumors, I take it, that I'm a madwoman seeking your attention through false accusations." "Yes, I've been informed." "And your response?" "That anyone who believes such nonsense isn't worth my time or consideration." He smiled, that same transformation she'd seen last night. "Excellent answer. Though I should warn you, that describes approximately 3/4 of London society. Then I suppose I'll have a great deal more free time for reading." An optimistic perspective. "I like it." He moved closer, his expression growing serious. "I came to tell you that I've hired investigators, discreet ones, to look into the Ashfords' affairs. If there's evidence of their plan, we'll find it. But it may take time. And until then, I'm the villain in their story." "Unfortunately, yes, which is why I have a proposal for you." Genevieve's heart quickened. "What sort of proposal?" "A strategic one. The Ashfords are counting on society's judgment to protect them. They believe that if enough people view you as unstable or attention-seeking, any evidence we find will be dismissed as fabricated, so we need to change the narrative." "How?" "By making it clear that you have my complete and unwavering support. Not just my belief in your account, but my public endorsement of your character and judgment." "Your Grace, Lucian, that will only make the rumors worse. They'll say I've compromised you somehow, or that you're motivated by—" She felt heat rise to her cheeks. "By what, attraction?" He said it so casually as if discussing the weather. "Let them say it. The truth is, I find you fascinating, Genevieve. You're brave, intelligent, and apparently willing to face social ruin rather than let injustice stand. Those are rare qualities. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you didn't hesitate to save my life. I know you haven't wavered in your account despite enormous pressure. I know you told your father you'd rather live with society's censure than a lie." He paused. "How do I know that?" "Because my valet's cousin is your father's footman, and servants talk. Welcome to how I gather information." Despite everything, Genevieve laughed. "That's remarkably underhanded. I prefer resourceful, but we're getting off topic. My proposal is this. Allow me to publicly court you." She stared at him. "I beg your pardon?" "Not a real courtship, necessarily, though I won't rule that out entirely." His eyes held a glint of humor. "But a visible, unmistakable demonstration that I value your company and judgment. I'll dance with you at every ball. I'll call on you regularly. I'll make it clear to all of London that any insult to you is an insult to me. That's madness. Your reputation will suffer. My reputation is already that of a dangerous, unpredictable recluse. This will simply add surprisingly good taste in women to the list." He moved closer still, close enough that she could see flecks of silver in those blue eyes. "The Ashfords want to isolate you, make you powerless. This does the opposite. It makes attacking you considerably more dangerous for them. Why would you do this? Risk your own standing for someone you barely know? Because you saved my life. Because I despise bullies and cowards, which the Ashfords most certainly are. And because—" He hesitated, something vulnerable flickering across his face. Because I've spent years keeping everyone at arm's length, trusting no one, expecting betrayal from every corner. Then you appeared and threw yourself into danger to save a stranger. That kind of courage deserves protection, not punishment. Genevieve's mind raced. What he was proposing was outrageous, potentially ruinous for both of them. But he was right about one thing. Isolated, she was vulnerable. With the Duke's support, she had power. "If we do this," she said slowly, "there need to be rules. I won't be treated like some helpless damsel in need of rescue. I want to be involved in the investigation. I want to help expose the Ashfords." "Agreed. And this arrangement, this fake courtship or whatever it is, it ends when we've cleared my name and brought them to justice. No expectations beyond that." "Of course," though something in his eyes suggested he wasn't entirely opposed to other possibilities. "And if at any point I ask you to stop, to end this arrangement, you'll do so immediately. No arguments. You have my word." She extended her hand. "Then we have an agreement, Your Grace." He took her hand, but instead of shaking it, he bowed and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture formal enough to be proper, but intimate enough to send warmth racing up her arm. "Please," he said, "if we're to convince society we're courting, you really should call me Lucian." "Very well, Lucian. And you should know that I'm quite terrible at pretending to be demure and obedient." "Excellent. I find demure and obedient exceedingly boring." Over the next fortnight, Lucian proved true to his word, with a thoroughness that left London society reeling. He appeared at the Sinclair residence every afternoon at precisely 3 o'clock, taking Genevieve for rides through Hyde Park in his elegant barouche. While other couples whispered sweet nothings, they discussed political philosophy and debated the merits of various investment strategies. Genevieve discovered that Lucian possessed a wickedly dry sense of humour, particularly when observing London's social peacocking. "Notice Lord Pemberton's new waistcoat," he murmured one afternoon as they passed the older gentleman. "The embroidery is so elaborate I believe I can see the entire history of the Crusades depicted across his stomach." Genevieve bit back a laugh. "That's unkind, but accurate. And look there. Lady Catherine is wearing the same gown she wore to Lady Morrison's ball last month. I predict she'll claim it's been completely redesigned. How do you even notice such things?" "I notice everything. It's both a gift and a curse. For instance, I've noticed that you fidget with your reticule when you're annoyed, that you have a small scar on your left hand from what I'm guessing was a childhood accident involving your sister and a garden gate, and that you despise tea but drink it anyway to be polite." She stared at him. "The scar was from Charlotte daring me to climb the gate. I fell. How did you know about the tea? You grimace slightly every time you take a sip, as if you're drinking medicine. Why continue if you dislike it? Because refusing tea at social gatherings marks one as odd. And you've spent so much effort already being perfectly conventional." His tone was teasing but not unkind. Their public appearances had the desired effect. Within days, the narrative began to shift. If the Duke of Hawkhurst, a man famous for avoiding society and trusting no one, had chosen to court Lady Genevieve Sinclair, perhaps there was more to her story than the Ashfords claimed. Of course, not everyone was convinced. "She's bewitched him somehow," Lady Pemberton declared at a musical that Genevieve attended with Lucian. The comment was loud enough to be clearly heard. Lucian, who'd been standing beside Genevieve examining the program, looked up with those ice-blue eyes. "Lady Pemberton, I wasn't aware you believed in witchcraft. How fascinatingly medieval of you." The older woman flushed. "I simply meant that Lady Genevieve possesses qualities that might make a man value her company. Intelligence, courage, integrity. Yes, those traits could indeed be considered enchanting to someone tired of vapid conversation and artificial flattery." "Your Grace, I didn't intend—" "Of course not. Just as I'm sure you didn't intend for your comments about Lady Genevieve's character to be interpreted as insults to my judgment in choosing her company. Because that would suggest you consider me so easily fooled, which would be quite insulting indeed." Lady Pemberton looked like she might faint. "I would never suggest such a thing." "Excellent. Then we understand each other." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Enjoy the performance." As they moved away, Genevieve whispered, "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. The moment people think they can insult you without consequence is the moment we've lost. Besides," he added with a slight smile, I enjoyed it. Lady Pemberton has been tedious for years. Someone needed to say something. But not all confrontations ended so smoothly. At Lord Harrison's ball the following week, they encountered the Ashfords themselves. The couple had been avoiding events where Lucian and Genevieve might appear, but apparently decided it was time to reclaim their social ground. Lord Edmund approached them in the refreshment room, his expression one of wounded dignity. "Your Grace, might I have a word?" "You may have several, Lord Ashford, though I cannot promise you'll enjoy my responses." Edmund's jaw tightened. "This vendetta against my wife and myself must end. You're a reasonable man. Surely you can see that Lady Genevieve was mistaken that night. The wine was tested after it had been spilled and handled by numerous servants. Any contamination could have occurred then. Interesting theory. Except Dr. Whitmore confirmed the poison was dissolved in the wine, not added to the stain afterward. The chemical composition was quite clear on that point. Then someone else must have poisoned it before dinner was served. A disgruntled servant, perhaps. My wife and I would never—" "Lord Ashford," Lucian interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous quietness, "I'm going to give you some advice. Stop talking. Stop spreading rumors. Stop pretending to be the injured party. Because the more you protest, the more attention you draw to your actions that night. And I promise you, I will find evidence of what you did. It's only a matter of time." "You cannot prove something that didn't happen." "Can't I? I've already discovered some fascinating information about your financial situation. Gambling debts, Lord Ashford? Quite substantial ones. And your shipping investments, the ones you convinced my father to recommend to me years ago. They've all mysteriously failed, haven't they? Yet somehow you've managed to purchase a new estate in Surrey." Edmund's face went pale. "Those are private matters." "Nothing is private when attempted murder is involved. I have investigators looking into every transaction, every business dealing, every conversation you've had in the past 5 years. If there's evidence of your plan to poison me gradually, to make it look like natural illness, to forge documents giving you control of my estates, I will find it." "That's preposterous. I never—" But Edmund's face had gone from pale to ashen, and his hands trembled slightly. "Shall we test that assertion? I think the magistrate would be very interested in examining your wife's recent purchases from certain apothecaries. Arsenic is surprisingly well documented when bought in quantity." Lord Ashford opened his mouth, closed it, then turned and walked away without another word. Genevieve realized she'd been holding her breath. "Did you mean all that? About the evidence?" "Every word. My investigators have been very thorough." He guided her toward the ballroom. "The Ashfords have been living beyond their means for years, funded by investments they convinced my father to make before his death. When those investments failed, suspiciously I might add, they needed another source of income. My estates, my fortune would have provided that. A gradual poisoning, a forged codicil to my will naming Edmund as executor. It's actually quite clever, if morally reprehensible. Can you prove it?" "Not yet, but I will." He paused as they reached the dance floor. "In the meantime, I believe this is our waltz." As he swept her into the dance, Genevieve marveled at how natural this had become. His hand at her waist, her hand in his, moving together as if they'd done this 1,000 times. They'd practiced, of course, ostensibly to maintain their courtship ruse, but somewhere along the way it had stopped feeling like practice. "You're thinking very hard about something," Lucian observed. "I can see the calculations behind your eyes." "I'm thinking about how strange this all is. A month ago I'd never met you. Now I'm dancing with you while half of London watches and whispers. Would you change it if you could?" She considered the question honestly. Her social calendar had certainly diminished. Many of her former friends now crossed the street to avoid her. Marriage proposals had dried up entirely, though whether from fear of scandal or fear of competing with a duke, she wasn't certain, but she'd also never felt more alive. "No," she said finally. "No, I wouldn't change a thing. Though I think that says something rather damning about my character. It says you value truth over comfort. That's not damning. It's extraordinary." The way he looked at her when he said it made her heart stutter. This was supposed to be pretend, she reminded herself. A strategic alliance. Protection in exchange for cooperation. So why did it feel increasingly real? "Lucian," she began, but he shook his head slightly. "Not here. Too many ears. Too many eyes." But soon, Genevieve. Soon we'll talk about everything that's unspoken between us. And if I'm not ready for that conversation, then we'll wait until you are. I'm a patient man when something matters." The dance ended, and he escorted her back to her father, who'd been watching from the sidelines with an expression caught between approval and concern. "Your Grace," the Marquis said, bowing, "you're very kind to show my daughter such attention." "It's no kindness, my lord. I find her company the most entertaining in London." He turned to Genevieve. "Until tomorrow afternoon?" "Until tomorrow." She watched him leave, cutting through the crowd with that predatory grace that made people instinctively step aside. "He's serious about you," her father said quietly. "I've known Lucian Hawkhurst since he was a boy. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. It's just an arrangement, father, a strategy to protect my reputation." "Is it? Because from where I'm standing it looks like considerably more than that." Genevieve didn't answer, couldn't answer, because her father was right, and that terrified her more than any scandal. She'd agreed to a fake courtship with England's most dangerous duke. She just hadn't anticipated it might become real. The investigation into the Ashfords progressed with methodical precision over the following weeks. Lucian's investigators, former Bow Street runners with connections throughout London's underworld, uncovered a trail of financial desperation and careful planning. "Look at this," Lucian said one afternoon in his study, spreading documents across his desk for Genevieve's inspection. They'd fallen into a routine of these afternoon meetings, ostensibly to discuss their strategy, but increasingly becoming something else entirely. Conversations that ranged from philosophy to literature to dreams neither had shared with anyone else. Genevieve leaned over the papers, her shoulder brushing his. Neither moved away. "What am I looking at?" "Receipts from an apothecary shop in Cheapside. 3 purchases of arsenic trioxide over the past 6 months, all signed by a Mrs. Ashworth. Has noticed the similarity to Ashford? That's not enough for a magistrate. She could claim it was for pest control, which is a legitimate use." "True, but combined with these," he produced another set of documents. "Gambling debts totaling nearly £15,000, owed to some rather unsavoury characters. Lord Edmund has been betting heavily at several clubs, losing consistently. The debts are recent, within the past year. So they need money desperately. More than that. Look at the dates. The gambling debts began accumulating about 6 months after my father died, which is also when Edmund started pressuring me to make certain investments that my father had supposedly recommended." Genevieve studied the timeline. "You think they planned this from the beginning, even before your father died?" "I think they've been planning something for years. My father and Lord Ashford were close friends. Edmund was named executor of his will, trustee of certain assets. When my father died, suddenly," he paused, something dark crossing his face. "You don't think—" "I don't know what to think. My father had been in perfect health. Then one day he complained of stomach pains, and within a week he was dead. The physicians said it was a sudden illness. But now, knowing what the Ashfords attempted with me—" Genevieve felt ice in her veins. "Lucian, if they poisoned your father too, this isn't just attempted murder. This is something I cannot prove, not yet. His body was buried 2 years ago. Any evidence is long gone." His hands clenched into fists on the desk. "But if I can prove they tried to poison me, if I can demonstrate their financial motive and their access to arsenic, perhaps the magistrate will consider reopening the investigation into my father's death." She covered his hand with hers, a gesture of comfort that felt natural now. "We'll find the proof, we have to." He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. "We make a good team, you and I." "We do." The words came out softer than she intended. "Genevieve, I think we should discuss—" A sharp knock interrupted. Jameson entered, his usual composure slightly ruffled. "Your Grace, I apologize for the interruption, but there's a rather insistent young woman at the door claiming she has information about Lord and Lady Ashford." Lucian and Genevieve exchanged glances. "Show her in," he said. The young woman who entered was perhaps 20, dressed in the neat but worn clothing of an upper servant. She bobbed a nervous curtsy, her hands twisting in her apron. "Your Grace, my lady, forgive me for coming here, but I didn't know where else to turn. My name is Mary Fletcher. I was lady's maid to Lady Margaret Ashford until 3 days ago, when she dismissed me without reference." "Why were you dismissed?" Genevieve asked gently. Because I found something I wasn't meant to see. Mary reached into her pocket and withdrew a small vial, identical to the one Genevieve had seen Margaret use that night. This was hidden in her jewelry box. When I asked her about it, thinking it was perfume, she became very angry, said I was spying on her, threw me out of the house that very day. Lucian moved forward, carefully taking the vial. Why bring this to me? Because I heard the rumors, Your Grace, about what Lady Genevieve accused my former mistress of doing. And I think she was right. I've been with Lady Margaret for 2 years, and over the past month she's changed. Secretive, always meeting with Lord Edmund in private, sending me away. And she's been buying things, expensive things, we couldn't afford. When I asked where the money came from, she said it was none of my concern. Did you ever hear them discuss the Duke? Genevieve asked. Mary hesitated, then nodded. Once. I was bringing tea to the drawing room and heard Lord Edmund say something about when Hawkhurst is gone. I thought perhaps he meant when you were away travelling, Your Grace. But then Lady Margaret laughed and said something about patience, that these things couldn't be rushed. The pieces were falling into place like a terrible puzzle. Lucian examined the vial. Is there anything still in this? A few drops, Your Grace. I didn't want to empty it in case it was evidence of something terrible. You've done the right thing coming here, Miss Fletcher. Lucian moved to his desk, writing quickly. This is the address of my solicitor. Go to him today and tell him I've sent you. He'll help you draft a formal statement about everything you've witnessed. And this, he handed her a small purse, should help you until you find new employment. I'll personally provide you with a character reference. Mary's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Your Grace. You're very kind. After she left, Lucian immediately summoned Dr. Whitmore to test the vial's contents. The physician arrived within the hour, performed his analysis, and confirmed what they already suspected. Arsenic, in the same concentration as had been found in the wine. This is it, Genevieve breathed. This is the proof we needed. It's a significant piece of evidence, Lucian agreed. Combined with Mary's testimony about the Ashfords' suspicious behavior, the receipts from the apothecary, and the financial motive, we have a compelling case, but... He paused. But what? But the Ashfords still have powerful friends. They'll claim Mary is lying for money, that we bribed her to fabricate evidence. They'll argue the vial could belong to anyone, that keeping arsenic for legitimate purposes doesn't prove murder. Then what do we do? A slow smile spread across Lucian's face, the dangerous kind that made him look like the predator everyone feared. We give them an opportunity to incriminate themselves further. We set a trap. That evening, Lucian sent carefully worded invitations to a small, intimate dinner party at Hawkhurst Manor. The guest list was strategic. Lord and Lady Ashford, several influential members of Parliament who'd been friends with Lucian's father, a prominent magistrate, and of course Genevieve and her family. They'll never accept, Genevieve said when she saw the invitation. Not after what happened last time. They will because I've also let it be known, through very discreet channels, that I'm planning to announce my engagement to you that evening. The Ashfords can't afford to skip such a significant social event without appearing even more suspicious. Your engagement to me, Lucian, we haven't discussed, I know, and I apologize for the presumption. But it serves multiple purposes. It demonstrates my continued faith in you, it draws the Ashfords out and... He met her eyes. It forces a conversation you and I have been avoiding. Her heart hammered. What conversation? The one where I confessed that this stopped being pretend for me weeks ago. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Genevieve found herself unable to look away from those ice-blue eyes that had once seemed so cold, but now burned with something else entirely. Lucian, you don't have to answer now, you don't have to answer at all. But I wanted you to know the truth before this dinner party, before whatever happens next. I've fallen in love with you, Genevieve. Completely, irrevocably, in a way I didn't think myself capable of. And regardless of what you feel in return, I will see this through. I will clear your name and bring the Ashfords to justice. That doesn't change. Genevieve's mind reeled. She should be shocked, should protest that they barely knew each other, should maintain the pretense of their arrangement. But standing there in his study, surrounded by evidence of conspiracy and murder, having spent weeks in his company discovering depths she'd never imagined, she couldn't deny the truth. She'd fallen for him too. I need time, she said finally. To think, to be certain. This has all happened so quickly. Take all the time you need, I'm not going anywhere. The night of the dinner party arrived too quickly. Genevieve dressed with unusual care, choosing a gown of deep sapphire that Charlotte insisted brought out her eyes. Her maid arranged her blonde hair in an elegant style, leaving a few curls to frame her face. "You look beautiful," her father said when she came downstairs. "Are you certain about this evening? If Lucien's plan goes wrong, it won't, it can't. This is our chance to end this." The Marquis studied her face. "You care for him, truly care for him." "Yes," she admitted. "I do." "Then I hope he's worthy of you, though from what I've seen I believe he is." Hawkhurst Manor blazed with light as their carriage approached. Footmen in impeccable livery stood at attention. Inside, the house had been transformed. Flowers everywhere, musicians tuning their instruments. The dining room set for an intimate gathering. Lucien greeted them personally, impossibly handsome in formal black evening wear. When he bowed over Genevieve's hand, his thumb brushed her wrist in a gesture so subtle, so intimate, that it sent shivers through her. "You look exquisite," he murmured, too quietly for anyone else to hear. "You're not so terrible yourself." His smile was quick, genuine. High praise indeed. The other guests began arriving. Lord and Lady Ashford came fashionably late, Margaret resplendent in emerald silk that must have cost a fortune they supposedly didn't have. Her smile was fixed, brittle. Edmund's face showed strain around the eyes. They knew something was wrong, they had to. Dinner proceeded with excruciating politeness. Conversation remained light. Politics, weather, the upcoming season. Genevieve noticed Lucien watching the Ashfords carefully. His expression pleasant, but his eyes calculating. During the fourth course he rose, glass in hand. "My friends, I've asked you here tonight for a special reason. As you know, recent events have been challenging. But through adversity, I've discovered something precious. I've found someone whose courage, intelligence, and integrity inspire me daily." Margaret's knuckles went white on her wine glass. "Therefore, it gives me great pleasure to announce my intention to marry Lady Genevieve Sinclair." The table erupted in congratulations. Lord Harrison raised his glass in toast. The magistrate offered hearty approval. Genevieve's father beamed with genuine joy. And the Ashfords looked like they might be ill. "This is wonderful news, Your Grace," Lord Edmund managed, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Though rather sudden, isn't it?" "When one knows, Lucien replied smoothly. "Why wait?" "Indeed. And I suppose all that unpleasantness with the accusations has been resolved?" "Resolved? No." "Investigated thoroughly?" "Absolutely." The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Margaret set down her glass with a sharp click. "Surely you're not still pursuing that absurd matter?" "Lady Genevieve has admitted she was mistaken." "I've admitted no such thing," Genevieve interjected. "I stand by everything I said." "Then you're delusional," Margaret snapped, her composure finally cracking. "You've bewitched the Duke somehow, convinced him of lies." "Careful, Lady Ashford." Lucien's voice was soft but deadly. "You're speaking about my future wife. Your future wife is a liar and a troublemaker who nearly destroyed our reputation." Interesting choice of words. Nearly. "As if our investigation hasn't already accomplished that goal." Edmund stood abruptly. "We don't have to tolerate these insults. Margaret, we're leaving." "Please do," Lucien said. "But before you go, I thought you might be interested in seeing something." He produced the vial Mary had brought. "Recognize this?" Margaret's face went chalk white. "Found in your jewelry box by your former maid. Still containing traces of arsenic trioxide, the same compound found in my wine that evening. Rather damning, wouldn't you say?" "That's not mine. She planted it. You paid her to plant it." "Did I also pay the apothecary in Cheapside to forge receipts showing someone using a name remarkably similar to yours purchased arsenic on 3 separate occasions? Did I fabricate your husband's gambling debts? Did I invent the financial records showing you desperately needed money you didn't have?" "This is entrapment." Edmund's face had gone purple. "You cannot prove any of this." The magistrate, who'd been listening intently, set down his napkin. "Actually, Lord Ashford, the evidence seems quite substantial. Combined with Lady Genevieve's eyewitness account and the physical evidence of the vial and contaminated wine, I believe there's sufficient cause to investigate further." "You're taking his side," Margaret shrieked. "We've been friends with your family for years." "Which makes this all the more disappointing." The magistrate stood. "Lord and Lady Ashford, I'm formally requesting you both accompany me to answer some questions about the events of that evening and your recent activities." "This is ridiculous." But Edmund's bluster was fading, replaced by genuine fear. "We've done nothing wrong." "Then you have nothing to fear from an investigation." Lucian's voice was cold. "Unless, of course, there's more you'd like to confess, such as whether this was your first attempt at poisoning someone for financial gain, or whether my father's sudden death 2 years ago wasn't quite as natural as it seemed." The blood drained from both their faces. "That's slander," Edmund gasped. "You cannot possibly suggest—" "I can suggest whatever the evidence supports, and my investigators have uncovered some very interesting facts about the timing of my father's illness, your financial difficulties, and your proximity to him during his final days." Lucian moved closer, and both Ashfords instinctively stepped back. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to cooperate with the magistrate's investigation. You're going to confess to your attempt to poison me, and if I find even a shred of evidence linking you to my father's death, I will ensure you both hang for murder." "We didn't kill your father," Margaret cried. "We only tried to—" She stopped, realizing what she'd admitted. Silence crashed over the room. "You only tried to what, Lady Margaret?" the magistrate asked quietly. "Please, do continue." Margaret looked at Edmund, who'd sunk into his chair, his face in his hands. All their practiced denials, their careful lies, had crumbled in an instant. "We tried to make him sick," she whispered finally. "Just sick enough that he'd need help managing his affairs. Edmund was supposed to take over gradually, make some investments, recover our losses. But we never meant to kill him. We weren't giving him enough for that. But you were poisoning him." Lucian's voice was deadly quiet. "Slowly, methodically, hoping to incapacitate him enough to gain control of his fortune. It wasn't supposed to be permanent, just temporary, until we could recover our financial position. And when I refused to make the investments you wanted, when I started questioning the arrangements my father had made, you decided to try again. But this time you planned to kill me, to forge documents making Edmund my executor, giving you control of everything." Edmund's head snapped up. "How did you—" "I found the forged documents in your study. You really should have better locks or more loyal servants. Your butler was quite helpful once I explained the situation. The Ashfords were finished and they knew it. As the magistrate called for the constables he'd had waiting outside, both Edmund and Margaret seemed to shrink, their elegant veneer cracking to reveal the desperate, greedy people beneath. "I'm sorry," Margaret said as the constables led them away. "We were drowning in debt. We had no choice." "There's always a choice," Genevieve said quietly. "You chose wrong." After they were gone, the remaining guests sat in stunned silence until Lord Harrison finally raised his glass. "To justice, and to Lady Genevieve, whose bravery made this possible." "To Lady Genevieve," the others echoed. Genevieve felt tears prick her eyes, relief, vindication, and something else she couldn't quite name. When she looked at Lucian, he was watching her with an expression of such pride and tenderness that her breath caught. The guests departed soon after, leaving Genevieve and Lucian alone in the drawing room. The fire crackled in the hearth. Outside, rain had begun to fall, pattering against the windows. "It's over," she said wonderingly. "It's actually over. Your name is cleared. Society will have no choice but to accept the truth now." "And your father? Will they investigate?" The magistrate promised to look into it. "With the Ashfords' confession about poisoning him, there's cause to examine the circumstances more closely. Even if we can't prove they killed him, they'll face charges for what they did to me. That's something." Genevieve moved to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. "I should feel triumphant, but I just feel tired. That's the exhaustion of battle ending. You've been fighting for weeks. It's natural. What happens now to us, I mean?" She turned to face him. "You announced our engagement tonight. Everyone believes we're to be married." "Yes." He moved closer, his expression uncertain, the first time she'd seen him anything less than completely confident. "I apologize for the presumption. I shouldn't have announced it without your explicit consent. If you wish to call it off, to claim it was part of the ruse to draw out the Ashfords, I'll support whatever story you choose." And if I don't want to call it off? His eyes widened slightly. Genevieve, you said this stopped being pretend for you weeks ago, when you fell in love with me. She took a breath, gathering her courage. It stopped being pretend for me too. Somewhere between the investigations and the afternoon rides, between the debates and the dances, I fell in love with you, Lucian Hawkhurst. Even though you're dangerous and intense and make half of London nervous just by existing. I make you nervous too, he said, but he was smiling. Terrified, but in the best possible way. He crossed the remaining distance between them, his hands coming up to frame her face with surprising gentleness. Marry me, Genevieve, not because of society's expectations or maintaining appearances. Marry me because I love you, because you're the bravest, most brilliant woman I've ever known, because I cannot imagine facing another day without you. Yes, she breathed. Yes, I'll marry you. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the chaste kisses society permitted. This was heat and promise, passion and tenderness, all the weeks of restraint finally breaking free. His hands tangled in her carefully arranged hair, her fingers gripped his jacket. The world narrowed to just this, his mouth on hers, his heart beating against her palm, the rightness of being in his arms. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucian rested his forehead against hers. I should probably speak to your father formally, ask his permission properly. He'll say yes, he already told me he thinks you're worthy of me. High praise from the Marquis Sinclair. Don't let it go to your head. You're still dangerous, difficult, and far too accustomed to getting your own way. And you love me anyway. Against all logic and reason, yes. He laughed, the sound full and genuine. Then I suppose we're both mad. Probably. But I've discovered I rather enjoy madness when it comes with you. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the last traces of scandal and suspicion. Inside, wrapped in each other's arms, Genevieve and Lucian began planning a future neither had dared to imagine just weeks before. A future built on truth, trust, and a love that had emerged from the darkest of circumstances to become something extraordinary. 6 months later, St. George's Church in Hanover Square was filled to capacity with the cream of London society, all gathered to witness what had become the most talked-about wedding of the season. The scandal of the Ashfords' trial, which had resulted in transportation to Australia for both Edmund and Margaret, had been replaced by fascination with the love story that had emerged from that terrible night. Genevieve stood in the vestibule, her hand on her father's arm, looking down the long aisle toward where Lucian waited. Her wedding gown was a masterpiece of ivory silk and delicate lace, but it was the expression on the Duke's face that made her breath catch, wonder and love and fierce possessiveness all at once. "Ready, my dear?" her father asked softly. More than ready. The ceremony was beautiful and surprisingly emotional. When Lucian spoke his vows, his voice, usually so controlled, trembled slightly on the words, "to love and to cherish." When Genevieve promised to honor and keep him, she saw his eyes glisten with what might have been tears. Charlotte, serving as maid of honor, had to dab at her own eyes with a handkerchief. The wedding breakfast at Hawkhurst Manor was an elaborate affair, but Genevieve barely tasted the food. She was too aware of Lucian beside her, his hand finding hers under the table, his thumb stroking her wrist in that gesture that had become their private communication. "Happy?" he murmured during a lull in conversation. "Deliriously." "Good, because I have a surprise for you." After the guests departed, and they were finally alone in the master suite that would now be theirs together, Lucian presented her with a leather-bound journal. "What is this?" she asked, opening it to find pages filled with her handwriting, essays, thoughts, observations she'd written over the past months. "I may have conspired with your sister to collect your writings. I thought you might consider publishing them. They're brilliant, Genevieve, your insights on social reform, education, women's rights. People should read them." She stared at him. "You want me to publish? Under my own name?" "Why not? You're a duchess now. You have the social standing to weather any criticism, and the world deserves to hear your voice." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Has anyone ever told you that you're quite possibly the most remarkable man in England?" "I believe you mentioned it once or twice, usually right before calling me insufferable. You are insufferable and remarkable, and mine." "Yours," he agreed, pulling her close. "Always yours." Their first year of marriage was everything Genevieve had never dared to hope for. Lucian proved to be an attentive, passionate husband who delighted in her company and encouraged her intellectual pursuits. True to his word, he helped her publish her essays, which garnered both controversy and acclaim. "Listen to this," she said one morning at breakfast, reading from the Times. "The new Duchess of Hawkhurst challenges conventional thinking with unusual directness." Unusual directness, as if having opinions makes me peculiar. "You are peculiar," Lucian observed from behind his own newspaper. "That's why I married you. You married me because I saved your life. I married you because I couldn't imagine living without you. The life-saving was just a fortunate introduction." She threw a piece of toast at him. He caught it without looking up from his paper. "Show off," she muttered. "You love it." She did. Their arguments were spectacular, intellectual debates that ranged from politics to philosophy to the proper way to organize a library. Their reconciliations were even better, passionate encounters that left them both breathless and laughing. "We're terrible at fighting," Genevieve said one evening after a particularly heated debate about parliamentary reform had ended with them in bed. "We're excellent at fighting. We're just better at making up. Semantics. You love semantics. I love you, you impossible man. I know, it's my greatest achievement." The ton, which had initially been scandalized by their courtship, gradually came to accept and even admire the unconventional couple. The Duke and Duchess of Hawkhurst became known for their intellectual salons, their progressive views, and their obvious devotion to each other. "They're still disgustingly in love," Charlotte reported, after visiting from her own recent marriage to Mr. Whitfield. "It's like watching a romance novel, except somehow more so." Genevieve's father, now enjoying his role as grandfather to Charlotte's children, smiled. "Some people are simply meant for each other. I recognized it the day Lucian first defended her at that terrible dinner party." 18 months into their marriage, Genevieve discovered she was expecting. Lucian's reaction was everything she could have hoped: joy, terror, and fierce protectiveness all at once. "You're certain you're well?" he asked for the 100th time. "Dr. Whitmore said everything is progressing normally." "Yes, Lucian. For the 100th time, I'm perfectly healthy. You should rest more. Perhaps stop attending so many social events. I'm pregnant, not made of glass, and I have a lecture series to complete on women's education reform." "Genevieve, don't Genevieve me in that tone. I'm growing a human, not becoming an invalid." He pulled her close, his hand splaying protectively over her still flat stomach. "I know, I can't lose you. You're everything." Her irritation melted. "You won't lose me. I'm far too stubborn to go anywhere. Promise me you'll be careful." "I promise. And you promise not to hover like an anxious mother hen." "I make no such promise." Their son was born on a crisp October morning, arriving with lusty cries that echoed through Hawkhurst Manor. Genevieve had endured a long labor with Lucian holding her hand the entire time, looking more terrified than she'd ever seen him, face down business rivals or social scandals. "You did it," he whispered, tears streaming down his face as he held their son for the first time. "You're extraordinary." "We did it," she corrected, exhausted but euphoric. "What shall we name him?" They'd debated names for months without reaching consensus. But looking at their son, dark hair like his father but with Genevieve's storm-grey eyes, Lucian said, "Rupert, after your father. He'd be honored, and it's only fitting." The Marquis raised an exceptional woman. "Rupert Lucian Hawkhurst," Genevieve tested. "It suits him. He's perfect, you're perfect. How did I become so fortunate?" "By being poisoned at a dinner party?" He laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Best thing that ever happened to me." Young Rupert proved to be a delightful combination of both parents. His father's intelligence and intensity, his mother's courage and stubborn streak. By his second birthday, he was already demonstrating a talent for getting into mischief that left his parents alternately exasperated and amused. "He put a frog in Lady Pemberton's teacup," Genevieve reported one afternoon, trying to keep a straight face. Lucian covered his mouth, clearly fighting laughter. "That's terrible. We should punish him." "We absolutely should after we stop laughing." Agreed. They found him in the garden, covered in mud, examining beetles with the intense focus that was pure Hawkhurst. "Rupert, my darling," Genevieve said, crouching down. "We don't put frogs in people's tea." "Why not? The frog was thirsty." Lucian turned away, shoulders shaking. "Because it's not polite." Would you like it if someone put a frog in your milk? Rupert considered this gravely. No, but the frog might. That's actually a fair point, Lucien managed. You're not helping, Genevieve muttered. That evening, after Rupert had been bathed, fed, and put to bed with a story about brave knights and clever ladies, Genevieve and Lucien sat in their private sitting room, her feet in his lap as he massaged them, a nightly ritual she'd come to cherish. Do you ever think about that night? She asked. The dinner party where everything changed. Every day, though my perspective on it has shifted. It's no longer the night someone tried to kill me, it's the night I met you. Rather dramatic circumstances for a first meeting. Fitting, though, nothing about us has ever been conventional. She smiled, thinking about their journey, from accusation and scandal to partnership and love. I suppose not, but I wouldn't change any of it. Not even the parts where half of London thought you mad. Especially not those parts. They led me to you. He pulled her closer, kissing her softly. I love you, Genevieve Hawkhurst, more than I thought possible to love anyone. And I love you, my dangerous, impossible, perfect Duke. Perfect? You've definitely hit your head. Perfect for me. That's all that matters. Years passed in a comfortable rhythm of love, laughter and occasional chaos, courtesy of young Rupert, and eventually his younger sister, Clarissa, who arrived 3 years after her brother with the same determination to conquer the world. The Duke and Duchess of Hawkhurst became fixtures of London society, known as much for their progressive salons and intellectual contributions as for their devoted marriage. Genevieve published several more volumes of essays, while Lucien used his influence to champion educational reforms and workers' rights. "We're becoming respectable," Genevieve observed one evening at a particularly dull society event. "Heaven forbid," Lucien replied. "Should I start a scandal to remedy the situation?" "Please don't. I've had enough scandal to last a lifetime." "Fair point." On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucien arranged for them to return to Hawkhurst Manor for a private dinner in the same dining room where their story had begun. The table was set for 2, candles casting the same dancing shadows she remembered from that fateful night. "Feeling nostalgic?" she asked as he pulled out her chair. "Grateful. I wanted to return to where it all started and remember how fortunate I am." "We both are." He poured wine, a different vintage, she noticed, with a smile, and raised his glass. "To the woman who saved my life in more ways than one. To 10 years of marriage, 2 remarkable children, and a love I never expected to find. To second chances," she added, touching her glass to his, "and to adventures yet to come." They drank, and then Lucien set down his glass with a slight smile. "I have something for you." He produced a leather box, opening it to reveal a necklace, a stunning piece featuring a deep blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds. "It's beautiful," Genevieve breathed. "It belonged to my mother. My father gave it to her on their 10th anniversary. I had it cleaned and reset, but the stones are original. I thought you should have it." Tears filled her eyes. "Lucien, I'm honored. Your mother would be proud of the man you've become. She would have loved you. You're everything she was, brave, brilliant, unwilling to accept injustice." He fastened the necklace around her throat, his fingers lingering on her skin in a way that still made her shiver after all these years. "Do you remember what you said to me?" she asked. "That first night when I accused the Ashfords." "I believe you." 3 words that changed everything. They did, because in that moment, when the entire world thought me mad, you chose to trust me. That's when I knew you were different. I knew you were different when you threw yourself across a room to save a stranger. Most people wouldn't have done that. Most people have better sense than I do. Most people are boring. You're extraordinary. She stood, moving into his arms. "We're rather extraordinary together, I think." "We are." He kissed her, deep and thorough, with all the passion of their early days, but now enriched by years of partnership and love. "Happy anniversary, my darling wife. Happy anniversary, my impossible husband." Later that night, lying in bed with moonlight streaming through the windows, Genevieve thought about the girl she'd been, the one who'd felt out of place in society, who'd worried she'd never find someone who understood her, who'd feared a life of comfortable misery. That girl had been brave enough to spill wine and face scandal, brave enough to trust a dangerous duke, brave enough to love without reservation. And in return, She'd found everything she'd never known she wanted: partnership, passion, purpose, and a family built on mutual respect and genuine affection. "What are you thinking?" Lucian asked sleepily, pulling her closer. "That I'm happy. Truly, completely happy." "Good. That's all I ever wanted for you." "For us," she corrected. "We're a team, remember? The best team in England. Possibly the world. Definitely the world." She smiled in the darkness. Outside, she could hear the night sounds of the estate: owls calling, wind in the trees, the distant sound of the fountain in the garden where Rupert liked to play. This was her life now. This beautiful, chaotic, perfect life. And it had all started with 3 simple words: "I believe you." Sometimes, Genevieve reflected, the greatest love stories begin not with love at first sight, but with trust, with someone choosing to believe you when the world demands doubt, with someone standing beside you when standing alone would be easier. Lucian had given her that, and in return she'd given him something he'd never had before, someone who saw past the dangerous duke to the remarkable man beneath. They'd saved each other, really, not just from poison or scandal, but from loneliness, from doubt, from lives half-lived in fear of judgment. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," he murmured back. "Always." And in the safety of each other's arms, in the home they'd built together, surrounded by the family they'd created, the Duke and Duchess of Hawkhurst slept peacefully. Their story, which had begun with danger and suspicion, had become something neither could have imagined. A romance for the ages, built on trust, courage, and a love strong enough to overcome any obstacle. In the years to come, when their children were grown and asked about how their parents had met, Genevieve and Lucian would exchange knowing glances and smile. "It's quite a story," Lucian would say. "The best stories always are," Genevieve would add. And then they'd tell it, the tale of a poisoned glass of wine, 3 life-changing words, and a love that had conquered scandal, society, and every expectation to become something truly extraordinary. Their legacy would extend far beyond their titles or wealth. It would live in the reforms they championed, the books Genevieve wrote, the example they set of what marriage could be when built on equality and respect. But most of all, it would live in the truth they proved together, that sometimes the greatest loves emerge from the darkest moments, and that courage, whether facing down murderers or facing your own heart, is always rewarded. The Duke and Duchess of Hawkhurst lived long, productive lives filled with love, laughter, and the occasional scandal. Rupert saw to that. They grew old together, their hair silver, but their love as fierce as it had been that first night, when a brave young woman had risked everything to save a stranger's life. And when, many years later, they were finally laid to rest together in the family chapel at Hawkhurst Manor, the inscription on their shared monument read simply, "Here lie Lucian and Genevieve Hawkhurst. He believed her. She saved him. Together, they changed the world." It was, everyone agreed, the perfect epitaph for the perfect love story. The end. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end of this unforgettable love story between Lady Genevieve and Duke Lucian. If this tale touched your heart, please subscribe, like, comment, and share. Your support, truly from the bottom of our hearts, means everything to us and helps us stay motivated to keep writing and sharing more stories of love, redemption, and powerful twists that take your breath away. At the end of this video, a new story suggestion will appear. Click and let yourself be swept away by another emotional, romantic journey. See you in the next one. Thank you for being here. The Legends of Love Team.